YouTube is full of videos about good knives. It's full of videos about bad knives. It's high time that someone makes a video about weird knives. This is 3 Weird Knives, and I'm your host, JJ Jinx!
Let's get weird.
This is JJ Jinx, and welcome to the third installment of my celebration of 100 weird knives. So what I've done for this video is I put together a whole list of weird / cool / unique and unusual knives that I will never own. Probably. I spent a long time making this list, and I kept on adding to it, removing from it, and I was like, you know what, I just gotta make the video. It's been way too long. So, to make up for that, I am resuming my 3 Weird Knives series. Over the past year or two, or however long it's been since I've done these videos, I've been accruing more and more weird knives into my collection from road trips, flea markets, antique stores, consignment shops, places like that. All up and down the eastern seaboard, everywhere from Pennsylvania to Florida and everywhere in between. So anyway, to make up for the delay in this video, I am going to post the very next installment of 3 Weird Knives, the traditional type of video, concurrently with this one. Now I'm blabbering too much, so let's get started. This is the F-100 Super Sabre, one of the first hypersonic jets. Flew over the skies of Vietnam for very wholesome reasons, I'm sure. Here's a look at the cockpit. Inside the cockpit, there is a knife. Do you see it? How about from this view? Yep, it's that yellow thing. So what is that, and why is it there? Well, it turns out that every once in a while, when you gotta eject from this aircraft, the glass domey thing that sits around you doesn't quite release very well. It's called a canopy. And that knife thing is called a canopy breaker. And it has a knurled aluminum handle with a blunt, stubby-looking blade. It's not sharp. It's not meant for slicing. It's meant for piercing. It's basically a glass breaker, but for jet canopies. And they come in lots of different colors. They got this metal frame that goes around it and a pull pin on the back to get it out. You can still get these on eBay, but because they're associated with military memorabilia, militaria, if you will, they go for quite a lot of money. I would love to have one just because it's just a unique piece for a very specific reason, but because it's like a surplusy / collectible thing, they go for like hundreds of dollars. Way too much money that I would want to spend. These chaps are Aztec warriors, and those clubby-looking things that they're wielding are a thing that I have trouble pronouncing, and it is called a macahuitl, or macahuitl. But they're basically large wooden paddles with slabs of obsidian kind of shoved into the edges. So the obsidian gets sharpened to just a razor-sharp edge. So is it a knife? Kinda. Is it a club? Kinda. It's a unique, cultural, iconic weapon of the Aztec people. And it would be really cool to have one, like an actual artifact. The macahuitl word means hungry wood. And sometimes they made them spiky, like this. I'll never have one, because they belong in a museum. This knife, I believe, came out in the 80s. The Black Eagle Reverse OTF. So the way these work, if you haven't seen them before, there are videos on YouTube. It's kind of a fixed blade, and the slotted piece of plastic that you see going up around the blade pulls down once that switch underneath is actuated. And so, therefore, it is a reverse OTF. Pretty neat thing. To my knowledge, I don't think anyone else has made anything like this. And you can find them every once in a while. I know I saw Tristan Barnett got his hands on one at some point. I'm very jealous. I would hold on to one of these things forever. But, like a lot of knives on my list here, it's a bit too much money for me. This old road is in Texas, one of those one-street town kind of places. They got a thrift store, parking spots. It's just a tired, dusty old town in good old Bowie, Texas. And very fittingly, they are home to the world's largest Bowie knife. Look at that. I would love to have that on my front yard. Here's another angle. You could practically use this thing as a sundial. You can get all kinds of silly photos with it, like this guy. Maybe I could commission one from Tristan Barnett. You're going to need a lot of bed frame. So this one looks like one of those plain Jane cheapo survival knives. Because that's exactly what it is. This is the Buckmaster 184. This knife came out also in the 80s, and it's very nostalgic for a lot of people. A lot of people remember having this when they were kids. They would throw it around in the dirt, play with it. The 80s was a different time for children. You could just go outside and play with shit like this, and it was fine. They also came with these two spiky things coming off the side, which, legend has it, was there so that you can tie a rope through the hole at the base of the handle and use the knife as a grappling hook. Funny enough, not only can you still find these listed on eBay constantly, they made tons of these, and they were really cheap at the time, but people also sell aftermarket spiky things. They just screw in and screw out, so people lose them all the time. Those are easier to find than the actual knife. And if I were to get my hands on one, as a collector, I would want it to be in absolutely new-in-the-box, pristine condition, like this one. This came with everything. You got the knife, the hard plastic sheath, the detachable Velcro sheath buckler thing, and you got the Buck knife, because this was made by Buck, warranty and all that stuff. You got the little survival kit that goes into the handle. Hang on. Check out this caution message. The two detachable anchor pins, which come with every Buckmaster, are not intended for use as grappling hooks, for scaling walls, or rappelling down sheer cliffs. Never throw your Buckmaster. It's a rugged tool which can serve you well in emergency situations, but use it with cookies. I did pull this photo from an auction, but I can't remember the price that it actually sold for. It was like an ungodly amount of money. It was like $600 or $700. People are very nostalgic for these things. Too rich for my blood. So what you're looking at here is a very simple looking folding locking knife made in Germany, Solingen. It's the Hubertus model 1406. You can still buy them. They are still made by the company, and they look great. They got that nice stag handle, big, bold bolster, and from what I've heard, they are made incredibly well. But why are they so hard to find, and why are they so expensive? Well, in part because it's an older design. The company doesn't make very many of them, but also it's the same exact knife used by Harrison Ford in Raiders of the Lost Ark. There's a very short scene when Indiana Jones is cutting Marion free of her ropes, and he pulls out his trusty pocket knife. And when I say his, I mean Harrison Ford's. He actually brought his own pocket knife to the set and used it in the movie, and that's the knife. And that's why I would want one of these. It's Indiana Jones's / Harrison Ford's pocket knife. Now, I hesitated with this one because it's like sort of a fantasy knife, but it also does actually exist because it was used in a movie, so it's a prop, but it's also real. Whatever, just roll with it. This is the Kandarian dagger. It shows up in the Evil Dead series. It's just a pretty nasty, macabre, gothic-looking thing made of, I think, a spinal cord. Ash finds it with a Necronomicon covered in cobwebs. Look at that creepy skull with its gaping, tormented face. You can buy pretty solid-looking replicas online, but some of them look better than others. It's just a really cool-looking thing. And if I were to have one, I would want the one that was used in the movie. Which is why I'll never own it. Picture this. It's Renaissance times. Everyone's gathering around the table for a meal. And while you're sitting in the candle-lit room, listening to the annoying douchebag on the banjo, what is one to do with their time? Sing, of course. Everyone loved to sing in the Renaissance times. They had tons of great songs, but it's hard to remember them all, you know? I get it. Nobody wants to be up on the karaoke stage and forget the lyrics. People of the Renaissance, the courteous lot that they were, came up with a good solution. Notation knives. These were basically table knives that were broad and flat and had the actual score to the songs written or imprinted into them so that you could just pretend like you know the lyrics. Problem solved. They made a lot of these back then. They are incredibly rare. Not a whole lot of them survived that time period, and the ones that did, they're pretty much all in museums. Again, because it's like an artifact of the Renaissance times, people are going to pay a lot of money for them, and also they should be conserved for, you know, historical reasons. But I would love to have one. I've never seen one on eBay, but if I did, it would probably go for many thousands of dollars, which is why I'll never own one. But what's to stop me from making my own? Maybe I should make a notation knife with the words to, like, a Prince song or something, you know? This nondescript-looking pocket knife was owned by Edgar Allan Poe. And if you look closely at the shield and the scales, he's got his name anagrammed right in there. He used it to sharpen the quills that he used to write his poetry. I couldn't really get a clear image of the Tang stamp or anything like that to figure out, you know, who actually made this thing, but it's basically a jackknife with kind of a teardrop-shaped handle and mother-of-pearl inlaid scales. These were the only two photos I could find on this knife online, and it didn't give any information about the actual knives. There were articles just about the fact that he owned one, and that's what it was. There it is. So I just had to go and look at it myself. So I did. I drove down to Richmond, Virginia, where there is an Edgar Allan Poe museum. Pretty cool place. And here's my photo to add to the internet's collection. There she is, sitting on a little velvety pedestal thing. And if you read the little placard that comes with it, it says that he gave it to Thomas Richmond, a relative of his close friend Nancy Annie Richmond, as security for a loan, which he just never paid back. Getting back into the militaria side of things, these are RAF escape boot knives, made from leather and suede sheepskin. So why is this thing on my list? There's a pocket cut into the sheepskin lining that contains a small little knife. Here it is. This is the RAF escape boot knife. pretty impossible to get your hands on because it's kind of a James Bondsy sort of piece of British militaria. Never saw this on eBay, never really looked for it that much either, for that matter. It's in museums, it's in personal collections. It would be so awesome to have one of these, though, with the boots. The SOE, Special Operations Executive. This is basically the British Secret Service. They came up with their own concealed knife that they would shove into the lapel of their shirts. It's the lapel dagger. It's little. I mean, this thing's like practically guitar pick sized. And they even came with instructions. You put it in the palm of your hand, flip it around. You could put a string on it and use it like a fidget spinner, and then put it between your knuckles and punch. Something like that. And they made a lot of different types. I mean, you know, it's for a lapel. It's for a nice shirt, so you gotta have a matching lapel dagger. I personally like that really, really shiny one right there. Kinda reminds me of Flight of the Navigator. I was very tempted to play the Jaws theme for this next one. It's Jaws! Yeah, I had to talk about this one. Well, here's a much better quality photo of this knife than I use in my intro. The shark knife was designed by Gil Hibben, who's still around and still designing knives. He made one of the Rambo knives for the movies. It was designed by Paul Ehlers and was originally called Jaws. Sold in the 90s for $7,000. I have no doubt that it still exists. I have no doubt that I'll never own it either. How much would it go for? $7,000. That's about $16,000 in today's money. I might have to take out a loan. The same designer also made this monstrosity. It's like a cool squid trident looking knife thing. How cool would it be to walk up to a barbecue and just start cutting a steak with that? Now for this next one, I just need to say, I'm not advocating for animal cruelty. But it would be cool to have one of these. What I'm talking about are these things on the end of this war elephant's tusks. Yes, there was a time when elephants were ridden into battle and were given armaments themselves, literally putting armor with fucking knives on them on their tusks. Here's what looks like a drawing or a wood print of one, or that might actually be a photo of one, I don't know. Imagine how intimidating it would be to see that on the tusk of an elephant charging straight at you. And then you got all these people on top throwing spears and shooting arrows and shit. Here's a picture of one from a museum. That is enormous and terrifying. I'd love to mount that on my wall. And I haven't watched it yet, but apparently on that show Forged in Fire, they got to make them. The elephant tusk swords. I'm guessing that was like the final challenge when they go to their home forges. I will never own one of those because I don't have an elephant. I just had to bring this one up. It's King Tut, who of course had a dagger. A very special dagger because it's made of steel. Now, for those of you who don't know, the Egyptians pre-existed the Steel Age. So how is it that King Tut had a steel dagger buried with him? The answer is, he's a time traveler. No, because the Egyptians found the steel already forged. Eh? Yeah, we have actually a lot of examples of steel daggers that predate the Steel Age because they were made from meteorites. How do we know they were made from meteorites? Let's have a closer look at Tut's dagger. Here's a few different images taken at different time points. I kind of dig that patina. It's rustier in some spots than in others. That indicates that the composition isn't entirely homogeneous. So, the heat treatment sucked. But hey, I can't blame the Egyptians. They were not in the Steel Age yet. Using X-ray photoelectron spectroscopy, we can get an idea of what this thing is actually made out of. And as you can see, from the grainy blue, yellow, and red colors. It's got a little bit of chlorine, a tiny bit of sulfur, and a ton of nickel. That is the fingerprint of a meteorite. Lots of nickel. To own this thing? Oh, forget it. Can't happen. I'd have to rob the museum myself. This is the unmistakable mug of Danny Trejo. In his first appearance on film, the movie Desperado, one of my favorites. As the story goes, he was walking by Robert Rodriguez's office in Venice, and Robert said, "Wow, you remind me of the bad guys in my high school." And then Danny said, "I am the bad guys in your high school." Robert tossed him a knife and said, "Here, twirl this in your fingers." And he got cast onto the set of Desperado as the silent knife-throwing assassin dude. It's a pretty cool scene. So much is said with so little. There's no dialogue. You don't know who this person is. Are they a hired assassin? Did they hear about a bounty? Or did he just wake up one day and said, "I'm gonna knife throw a motherfucker to death"? And all of those are believable. That's what's so great about this scene. And we do get a close-up of the knives, too. They're in this wraparound sheath thing that goes all around his belly. Each of the knives are adorned with a Christian crucifix-looking handle and short, stubby dagger blades. Here's a close-up of him holding a couple of them in his hand. And the movie prop people have got your back if you want one of your own. They've analyzed every angle and came up with an exact replica of these knives. But if I were to own one of these knives, I would want one of the actual ones made for the movie, thrown by Danny Trejo, and then stabbed into Antonio Banderas. So probably won't be something I'll own. But it's not too late. Danny Trejo's still around. Antonio's still around. I could get one of these knife replicas. Convince Danny Trejo, "Hey, remember Desperado? You want to do that again? Here, twirl this in your fingers." And then Antonio Banderas will just be walking down the street, and it'll be like muscle memory. Danny will just be like, "Whoosh," and then I will have my knife. Well, there were a lot of other knives that I wanted to include. I left off all the fantasy stuff, the mythological stuff, and I just kind of said, okay, time to push out this video and just keep going. I can always come back and revisit this topic later. So once again, thank you for observing my celebration of owning 100 weird knives. And feel free to jump in and tell me about weird knives that you would want in the comments below.